Guys, today we're going to be working on this Buick Lucerne. So here we have a multi-port fuel injection system, and as you can see we only have one line going to both fuel rails, so that tells us that this is a returnless fuel system.
We will now be doing some electrical testing on the fuel pump of this vehicle. The diagram shown here is for the fuel pump relay. So on this Buick, the fuel pump relay is located in the rear fuse box here. It's the top relay over here, so this is where we'll start our testing. So we will now be testing with the key off here at the rear fuse box in the fuel pump relay. So as you can see on the control side of the relay, if you test at the ground point, you get full battery voltage, 12.9. And if you test at the other pin, so pin 85, you also get a ground, this time of 11.5 volts with the key off. So now with the key on engine off, we are testing at pin 86, which is the ground point of the control side. You can see we still had a 12.5 full battery voltage. Now if we test at the power side here, pin 85, or control side pin 85, sorry, you can see we get a full 12 volts of battery power now. So that circuit actually switched from ground to power when you turned it on. We will now do a test to verify proper operation of the fuel pump. We have jumped on the pin 30 and pin 87 of the relay. So these are the power and ground for the load side. So if we connect the two wires, I'm not sure if you can hear in the video, but I can hear that the fuel pump is indeed running. Alright, so now we will be conducting a fuel pressure test. As you can see, we have a fuel pressure gauge set up here to the fitting on the fuel rail. So now if we go key on, engine off, you can see that the fuel pressure spikes up to a little over 60, and as the fuel pump continues to pump and eventually stops, the fuel pressure drops down to about 50 psi. As you can see here, the expected value was between 56 to 62 psi on the fuel pressure with the key on, engine off, so our fuel pump is within parameters. So now we have the vehicle running to observe how the fuel pressure reacts. At idle, it hovers around 62 psi. Now we're going to rev the engine up and see how the fuel pressure changes. As you can see, there are only slight drops in the pressure despite the changes in RPM. When the pressure drops, the regulator is able to detect this and increase the duty cycle for the fuel pump. Alright, so now we will now be showing how to remove the fuel injectors and fuel rail. So if you look here, this is the all data procedure. Please feel free to pause if you want to take a look at any point. When reading a procedure like this, make sure to pay special attention to any bolded or highlighted points. When tapping into a fuel system, there are many dangerous things that can happen, so it's good to make sure you pay attention to all the cautions given in the service procedure. So to remove these fuel injectors, you need to unplug most of this wiring harness here and get rid of all the obstruction, so that's what we're currently doing. We'll be pulling off this clip right here. This vacuum line needs to get unclipped. This connector's out of the way as well.
Hey guys, so on this car we're going to be removing the fuel rail and injectors, and this one has a quick disconnect fuel line right here, but you're going to need a special tool to insert right here and pinch it to disconnect it. You want to put a paper towel for any fuel that's going to leak down, just to not make a mess. But before you do that, on any fuel system, if you have this relief fitting, you always want to press it down to relieve any fuel pressure. We already did this earlier. And just like that, pull it out. A lot of fuel comes out. So after we've disconnected the fuel line and we've moved all the wiring harness out the way and loosened the 4 10mm bolts that hold the fuel rail, you're just simply going to just grab the fuel rail and gently wiggle it, and your whole fuel rail will come out with all the injectors on it. We're going to demonstrate if you want to remove a fuel injector and just replace one from the fuel rail, because it's obviously gone bad. You just simply get your screwdriver, put it on this tab here, pull it back, and it comes out, and then as it comes out, you just simply get your fuel injector, wiggle it out. There's an O-ring on the top.
A fuel injector on any standard multi-port system will look very similar to this. They may be slightly different shape or size, but it will have an O-ring up top to seal to the fuel rail, and an O-ring on the bottom to seal to the intake manifold or wherever it injects. And it'll have a 2-pin connector here, one for constant power and one for switch to ground through the vehicle's computer.
So as you can see here, the tip is a little dirty, it's a little brown, but if you look even carefully, you can see the 2 holes, they're perfectly clean, so the injector should be working fine.
So we'll now reinstall the fuel rail. We will not show this whole process on the video, but one important thing is to make sure all these injectors are properly angled and lined up into their port. It's also important to put a little bit of lubricant such as Seal Glide or engine oil on the O-ring itself so that it doesn't get damaged on installation. We will now be using a picoscope to read the waveform pattern for the amperage and the voltage on the fuel injectors of this vehicle. These 2 diagrams show the wiring schematic for these fuel injectors. So now we have hooked up a picoscope with both a voltage probe and an amp clamp to our injector. As you can see here, you can see the simultaneous spikes of the voltage and the amperage reading right there. Amperage is in red, voltage is in blue. You can see when the injector first opens, the amperage is low but ramps up as the injector is pulled open. And then once the injector shuts down, the amperage drops and the spike is up to about 30 volts when the magnetic field collapses. We now have the short-term fuel trims, long-term fuel trims, O2 sensor input, and injector pulse width pulled up on our scan tool. As you can see, the injector pulse width increases as you rev the vehicle. It also changes along with short-term and long-term fuel trim.